Hey everyone, this is Lomi, and today I'm making a shirt for slim mini-sized boys such as Minifee. The pattern is on my site, and we're going to jump right in by attaching some loop lace to the facing piece. The lace should go on the right side of the facing, and the wrong side of the facing should be marked with the cut line where it will later be split for a front opening. You can see the lace gets placed so the wrong side of the lace falls along that split line just on the other side of the fabric. This looks weird now, but it'll let us lace up the front of the shirt later on. Put the right side of the facing against the right side of the shirt front so the lace is sandwiched between the layers. Then sew along the sides of the line drawn for the split, about 1/4 of an inch from the line. My lighting is a little blown out, so it's hard to see, but you'll stop and backstitch where the seam meets the point of the little Y-shaped fork drawn on the facing. As I sew, I find the fabric I'm using shreds really easily, so I take a second to fold the front piece of the shirt back and expose the raw edges of the facing so I can finish them with a zigzag stitch. This isn't always necessary, but you can do it before starting if you know what to expect from your fabric. Or if you get a surprise like I did in using a new brand of material, you can adapt by finishing the sides and bottom of the facing now, like I am. Next, cut along the line for the front slit and snip into the little lines of that Y shape at the base, which gives you a little arrow of fabric down at the bottom. Now you can fold the facing to the inside. You can see how this gives us an exposed loop lace that can be laced up with ribbon or cording for a classic fantasy look. You can top stitch around the edges of the split to hold the facing in place just like this, with a more visibly open split, or you can do what I do and fold the facing so it lays behind the lace and creates a little more visual interest. No matter how you choose to finish this front opening, make sure everything is laying nice and smooth, and then top stitch along the edge to hold it in place. After the front opening is done, put the front and back of the shirt together, right sides together, and pin the shoulders. Sew the shoulder seams, making sure to backstitch at the neck opening so the shoulder seams won't pull apart when you pull on them to attach the collar later on. Finish the edges with a zigzag stitch. Next up is the sleeves. Begin by pinning the end of the sleeve and the cuff together with right sides together. The sleeve is wider than the cuff, so you'll need to fold or gather it to fit. You can gather with a needle and thread if you prefer, but I'm actually going to just space the wrinkles out evenly and pin it because it's a bit faster and achieves the look I want. Then sew the cuff and sleeve together. To finish the cuff of the sleeve, fold the raw edge of the cuff in by about 1/4 of an inch, then fold the cuff in half so it envelops the raw fabric of the seam. I find this is easier when I fold and pin the edge of the cuff first, then fold and pin again, so I'm not trying to tuck the raw edge to the inside and get the cuff to lay right all at the same time. I pinned from the wrong side though, so I take a second to move mine to the other side so they'll be easier to pull out as I sew. It's easier to have them on the top side of the material, and it gives a cleaner result if you sew the cuff from the side that will be visible at the end. Sew the cuff shut by running a seam close to the edge of the cuff where it joins the sleeve. I aim for about 2 or 3 millimeters, so pretty close to the edge. Then prepare the other sleeve the same way. Once both sleeves are finished, it's time to connect them to the shirt. Put the sleeve and the body of the shirt together with right sides together, and pin the ends of the sleeve into the armhole first, so the ends of the sleeve are nicely lined up with the ends of the armhole. Like the cuff, the top of the sleeve is just a little bit gathered, so like with the cuff, I place my gathers manually and pin them how I want them, then sew the sleeve to the body of the shirt. Finish the edge with a zigzag stitch and connect the other sleeve to the shirt the same way. Next, we'll close one side of the shirt. Start at the cuff and fold the sleeve shut so it's inside out. I like to pin the cuff, then the underarm seam, then even out the edge of the sleeve and pin that. I do the same thing for the side of the shirt body, then starting at the cuff, I sewed down the sleeve to the underarm seam and continued down to the side of the body until I reached the bottom edge. Now, this is a pretty small doll, and that sleeve will be really bulky with that thick of a seam, so I cut the seam allowance in half before finishing the edge with a zigzag stitch. That lets the sleeve lay more naturally on the doll. My sewing machine doesn't backstitch when doing a zigzag, so to keep the zigzag from coming undone at the cuff of the sleeve, I use the thread tails to tie a quick knot before I trim off the extra. That first sleeve is looking good. We'll finish the other in a second, but first take a moment to run a zigzag stitch along the bottom edge of the shirt body. Why do we do that now? Because it's easier to do when that edge can be finished with a single straight seam. And after it's done, now we can finish the other side of the shirt, again beginning at the cuff, pinning there and in the underarm, down the side of the body, and everything in between. I'll sew this shut, trim the seam allowance, and finish with a zigzag stitch and knotted thread just like before. Once the shirt is turned right side out, I can fold the bottom edge of the shirt in by 1/4 inch and pin it in place. How you place your pins is up to you. Running them sideways instead of poking out might be less intimidating. This is just what's easiest for me. Once it's all pinned, slide the edge under the foot of your machine and sew that bottom hem. Make sure you keep the rest of the shirt folded back and out of the way. Go all the way around the bottom, backstitch so it won't come undone, and clip your loose threads. Now all that's left is adding the collar. Now, since this shirt is great in this crinkly kind of fabric and this stuff is prone to stretching while cutting and sewing, you'll want to check the length of the collar before sewing. I do that by laying the collar pieces along the edge of the neck hole, making sure to keep in mind that there will be a seam allowance at the ends, and discover my collar is a little too long for what I need. I cut off the excess fabric from the ends. If you finish the front slit with more exposed lace, you may need to trim off even more to get a good fit, so make sure to adjust this to your specific piece. Then sew the collar pieces together, up one side, across the top, and down the other side. It can help to backstitch at the beginning and end to keep the collar secure. Trim the seam allowance and corners of the collar so it will turn more easily. Then turn the collar right side out. I use a wooden stick to turn the corners, and then finger press the edges so it lays nicely. Put the collar and shirt together with right sides together and pin just one layer of the material to the body of the shirt. I like to pin the ends and then flex my fabric to fit the neckline along the length of the collar. Then, because this piece is particularly tiny, it's best to sew it on by hand. This is the hardest part of putting this shirt together, but just take your time and it shouldn't be too difficult. Once you reach the end of the collar, flip it upright, fold the other raw edge to the inside, and sew that down too. I use pins to keep everything tidy while I sew. You may not need to, but it's useful for making sure everything lays nicely. I use a hidden stitch to connect the edge of the collar along the seam I just made, so that no stitches will be visible. Once I get to the end and knot my thread, that's it. The shirt is now done, pending adding a ribbon to the front to lace it shut. And here's the end result. The cuffs are still a little poofy on mine, but considering I haven't ironed it yet, it looks pretty good. That's all for today though. Thanks for watching. Bye.